Hello, readers. Coming up, it's my chat with Doug Peacock on Was It Worth It? First, I wanted to encourage you to check out our website at booksonpod.com. While there, you can sort through past shows by episode number, book title, author's last name, or sort by category. For instance, select the animals in nature or science and medicine category for episode number 146 with Douglas Chadwick on Four-Fifths a Grizzly.
This is Doug Chadwick, the author of Four-Fifths a Grizzly, a new perspective on nature that just might save us all. And this is Books on Pod with Trey Elling.
Hello, readers. Doug Peacock is a Vietnam vet, filmmaker, naturalist, and writer who has been published widely on wilderness issues. His newest book, put out by Patagonia, is titled Was It Worth It? A Wilderness Warrior's Long Trail Home. Doug, thank you for the time. How you doing today?
I'm doing just fine. Thank you for inviting me.
It's my pleasure. So what was your goal with this book?
The main thing is I wasn't sure I'd have enough time to write another, so I sort of crammed every last important story that I hadn't published into this book. And this book is very much a memoir of climate change. And, you know, that's the beast of our time. And that's what hangs out throughout the entire book. I picked stories that I hadn't published that, might have, for instance, I found sign of the last Mexican grizzly in the Sierra Madres in 1985. And that's just an important bit of information. So I put that story in there. And with my buddies, I went over to the Russian Far East to go look for a Siberian tiger. And the tiger that we ran into 5 years later set up an ambush for this guy, a poacher who had wounded him, and waited a couple of days at this guy's cabin in the remote Siberian taiga, and killed him, dismembered him, ate him. And it was such a good story that 10 years later, somebody published a best-selling book called Tiger. And 2010, which is kind of late to the game, but I thought I should connect those dots and print that story. And I took that trip with Yvonne Chenard and Doug Tompkins and Tom Brokaw, Rick Ridgway, and Jeb Ellison. And Doug has subsequently drowned in a kayak accident in Chile. So
Spoke with Rick Ridgway about that, and also just how much he's been around death. And that seems to be a commonality amongst you guys that spend a ton of time in the wilderness and really challenge what humans are capable of in the wilderness. And you said that you tried to get a bunch of these stories in because you don't know how much longer you have. Is that just a result of the life that you've chosen to live and some of the risks that you're taking in the process? For instance, when you are hunting for that Mexican grizzly, you are literally being awakened by howling coyotes and wolves. You'd seen jaguar tracks. You have an incredible picture in this book of jaguars as well. I mean, you are constantly surrounded by danger.
Yeah, and that is also just a side product of accidentally living a really rich life, and I'm happy for every one of those encounters. Those wild animals, especially the dangerous one, have really enriched my life in so many ways. That jaguar down in the Sierra Madres backtracked me 14 miles, and he came around the campfire one night and we could hear him. I was with a buddy down there, but it was like a mystery animal. I could smell him, I could hear him, but I never saw him.
So was that picture that you took that is in there from about 3 feet away from this jaguar?
Yeah, but that's somebody else's
with...
picture.
Okay.
Patagonia found that picture for me.
I gotcha.
you know, and that's a tough animal to see. That's really a great one.
How was the most indispensable wilderness experience of your life? How did it happen by accident in Yellowstone National Park in the decade after you got back from Vietnam?
Well, after Vietnam, I came back in the spring of '68, and I couldn't be around like many other veterans. I couldn't be around anybody, you know. And so I went to the one place that I was comfortable, and that's the American wilderness, especially the Rocky Mountains. And I was up in the Wind Rivers, waiting for the snows to melt. And the east side of the Wind Rivers is a place where the snows linger all summer long. And I came down with a malaria attack, you know, paroxysm, as we call them. And, you know, I'd had several in Vietnam, so I knew what was coming. And so I got the hell out of the Wind Rivers, which is a wild, cold, wet, wonderful place. And and I headed towards Yellowstone, and you know, I got to Yellowstone where the topography was relatively flat in comparison to Wind Rivers, and weather was better. And I went into this thermal area where you know, I knew it from earlier trips, and I was just planning on, you know, embracing that old notion of soaking in hot water and a spa and healing from the malaria attack. So I say accidentally because I kept a notebook, and the last entry I made, I had a thermometer and my temperature went up to 105.6. And, you know, I knew it was coming, and that's the last entry. I don't know if I was there sweating in my sleeping bag for 3 hours or 3 days. It just came. So, you know, and I was aware of bear tracks all around the place. And I was just loony enough in my mind from the fever that I wasn't sure if they're real bears or not. And it turned out they were, you know.
Well, speaking of bears, you are admittedly drawn to grizzlies. You've done plenty of things to help sustain the grizzly population throughout your life. What do you find so appealing by this magnificent creature?
Well, it's the one animal we have on this continent who reminds the most arrogant species of life on Earth, which happens to be Homo sapiens, of our place in wilderness and nature and the wild. And you know, you're not top of the food pyramid when you go into grizzly country, and you got to pay attention. You know, you see outward because there's something out there that's bigger than you, and if it chooses to, it could kill and eat you. And I've always found that a healthy mental state, you know, the external point of view. And this is sort of an enforced humility to live with grizzly bears. And, you know, no year of my life since I came back from Vietnam has gone without me going to see a grizzly bear. And, you know, it's really the central story, annual story of every year I tell of my life. It's, you know, going to see the grizzly. And, you know, so I've been doing what I can to keep them around, protect them, fight for them, film them, you know, for over 50 years now. And, you know, they're worth it all.
And occasionally you find yourself in situations with grizzlies that could become dangerous, but you understand how to act in those situations. For somebody who's listening right now, who hopefully never encounters this hypothetical I'm about to ask you about, but if somebody does find themselves in a situation with a potentially aggressive grizzly bear, what is the best way to behave and to basically get yourself out of that situation?
Now, that's a good question. Aggression in grizzly bears is very limited. You know, the only aggressive grizzly that I have run into in my life were dominant males in the spring defending a carcass, like a carcass of a buffalo or a moose or an elk. And that's still pretty rare. It's only happens about 25% of the time, almost always in the spring, and it's just because it's, it's life or death to the bear. The most dangerous situation by far is running into a mother with cubs, because she will do anything she needs to take care of those cubs. And all you have to do to come out on the rosy side of that equation is not be a threat to her cubs. So what I do is nothing. If a mother grizzly is one of the last ones I ran into, not the last one, but I ran into one with my daughter in Yellowstone. And we were up there on a windy day in the spring. It was early June, and my daughter and I are up on this mesa with these big boulders. They're glacial erratics, but we're huddled behind one of the glacial erratics just to get out of the wind. The wind was roaring, and all of a sudden, I've got my daughter kind of tucked in there, and her expression changes. So I look over there, and there's a mother grizzly and her yearling cub walking right towards us on this, little tiny, it's a butte, so it's not a huge area on top. And we all see each other at the same time, and the grizzly bear rears and stands up and sniffs around. They rear when they want to see or smell better. That's not a threat whatsoever. But the only thing I said to my daughter is, don't move. And we didn't. And after 4 or 5 minutes, the bear settled down, and they came over this rise right towards us. And they were, when they walked past us, they were only like 20 feet away. It's, but we did not move a muscle. And the grizzly bear, the mother, took her 1.5-year-old cub to the edge of this cliff, because we're up on a edge of the steep butte, and it's a cliff there. And again, she's only 15 or 20 feet away when she proceeds to nurse her cub. You can hear this rhythmic puttering sound that bears make when they nurse their young on the, within 20 feet of us for 7 or 8 minutes. So that is, that window of trust was opened by being really receptive. And, the fact is, we know that happens quite a bit up in Canada and Alaska, where you got salmon streams. I've had mother grizzlies leave their cubs with me, go get a salmon and come back, and the cubs are sitting right next to you on the riverbank, and get her cubs and just go on. But you never see that kind of behavior in Glacier or Yellowstone unless you kind of go out of your way and open that window of trust to, in this case, mother grizzly. I don't have any fear of mother grizzlies, because I know they only care about the safety of their young. And but people get mauled because they try to run or they try to climb trees, and you can't do any of that with a mother grizzly. You don't want to move fast, you don't want to scream at them. You just need to be calm. And I usually look off to the side, because grizzlies, the frontal orientation is a challenge to grizzly bear. And so I look off to the side and I talk, but not very loud. And I've had like 36 close calls like that, and so far so good.
You are a self-admitted insomniac. Why do you find sleeping in the desert to be so soothing?
Well, I'm down in the desert now, and the area to my west is, you can go almost 200 miles out there and not cross a road. It's really, and I have walked across it by myself, solo, carrying my own water 7 times end to end. It takes me about 10 days. And so, I'm used to that, but I wrote a little chapter ostensibly on bighorn sheep, but it's kind of tongue in cheek. I say I go into the desert to get a good night's sleep, because insomnia has been the central dysfunction of my adult life. But I walk out there, I walk sometimes 20 miles a day carrying a really heavy pack. And so, at the end of the day, you're ready for a good night's sleep. And I kindle a little fire and it's a magical thing. Ed Abbey and I traveled together out there a lot. And for the first 4 or 5 years, we just took our pickup trucks, because it's supposed to be just a rugged Jeep voyage across this desert. But towards the end of Ed's life, we both, truck camping just was a little tame. And, I wanted to have a real adventure. So we started walking out there. And it ends up, that was, the greatest currency Ed Abbey and I shared. And we were close enough friends that I buried him out there. I was with him when he died and found a good place with 3 friends to stick him in the ground. And that was the greatest, those walks were the greatest currency we ever shared. It's a magical place. It's full of reverence and everything happens so slow, even though you're walking, 160 or 70 miles. It just, you've got time for the entire world, and you watch the plants and the flowers emerging in the spring. And it's full of animals, not necessarily big animals, but there's deer and bighorn sheep and pronghorn antelope out there, along with, coyotes and mountain lions, and lots of smaller animals. And it's a great place for birds. And it just, it was, I'm going to go out there as soon as I sort of hang up on you. I'm going to go out there with my dogs tonight and just savor the desert, because it's just I live in Montana most of the time where the grizzly bears are, but I really have 2 polar mistresses in my life. And one is grizzly country in Northern Rockies. I live about 30 miles north of Yellowstone. And the other one's down here, down here in the desert. And when the grizzly bears hibernate, I hightail it south. I'm about 40 miles from the Mexican border right now.
Gotcha. You were north of the American border in 1991 when you were stalking polar bears. How is the strategy of stalking polar bears different from that of grizzlies?
Well, it turned out not to be that much difference. We were up there. I was with Doug Tompkins and Rick Ridgway again, and that's my polar bear spear on the cover of the latest book. But in the summertime, we ran in mainly family groups, mothers with young, and they were just like grizzly bears, the same. They were wary of human beings being around their cubs, and I didn't, it was a very benign exchange. Now, polar bears, if you're around them year round, they're a different kind of animal. They're actually genetically very close to a grizzly bear. A polar bear was basically a Russian grizzly bear, a brown bear that wandered north onto the ice and started hunting seals. And the end product of that evolution, it takes a couple 100,000 years to complete it, is this polar bear that looks different colors. But on the other hand, they breed with one another, and their offsprings are reproductive. So, they're very close. And
that was shocking to find out about. And I'm guessing that it creates a sort of mixed color between the brown of the grizzly bear and the white of the
does.
polar bear.
I've only seen pictures of them, but they've, of course, hunters are big on that. They want to bag whatever the hybrid's name is. But, right now with climate change, nothing is warming faster than the Arctic. The sea ice is basically gone, and by September of every year, the Arctic sea ice has melted far beyond the continental shelf. And that's where all the polar bear food is, mainly, ring seals. They live on marine mammals largely. And now polar bears are moving inland they're feeding on snow geese during their fledgling period when they can't fly, and they're eating grass. And grizzly bears at the same time, some of them are moving north because of the same problem, because of the droughts and the fires. The boreal fires are crazy. So you've got, these two ostensibly different looking animals running into one another, and they mate, and the offspring are are reproductive. So we've got another hybrid of a bear coming along out there, and if any of us last long enough on this warming planet, you would see that the polar bear would quite possibly fold its genes back into the brown bear. It's a recessive gene, and it's popped out a couple times in geologic history. And you wouldn't see any polar bears in the flesh, but genetically they'd be out there, and you'd find them inside a grizzly bear that does that transition to a marine, to a marine diet again. So
speaking of a polar bear's diet, how do polar bear attacks typically play out?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I kind of strayed from that one. In the wintertime, when I have been up there, but I didn't run in polar bears. But in the wintertime, polar bears, there is a really scary predation pattern of polar bears on people, and they come and kill people pretty much like they kill ring seals, which is their primary food. They wait in a hole until the seal pops up and they bite them on the head. Well, in the wintertime, pods of displaced workers, mainly on oil rigs, come out of the outhouse or wherever they come out in the dark of the winter night is it's 24/7 up there, and there's a polar bear waiting for them, and sometimes it's displaced pods of scientists camping on the ice, and somebody comes out of a tent and blammo, the pattern of predation is almost always a younger male polar bear. So it's like a 3 or 4-year-old, and their behavior is not quite set as much then. That's about the only reason that the young bears are experimenting with food sources. And it's pretty terrifying stuff. Yeah, I would be, I'd be a little uncomfortable in the wintertime in polar bear country.
No question. Now, you are a gun lover who hates the NRA. Why?
Yeah. Yeah, I wrote a chapter in this book that I wrote for, I probably published it in Daily Beast or someplace. But I don't trophy hunt. I wouldn't kill a bear or a wolf or a predator for a cool million at least. And there's just and I gave up on the NRA. They were back. Ed Abbey had an NRA sticker, and he gave me one. I never put it on my truck because they've just evolved into a whole agenda. It's basically a right-wing agenda, and none of which I can embrace. And I do have plenty of guns. People give them to me. God, I don't know why, but they give me a lot. I got some really good ones. And in my life, I hunt many birds and occasional deer, but I am, I'm not a fan of the NRA. Has joined up with the Safari Club International, and they are the enemy of wildlife. They were the ones that wanted the grizzly bear taken off the Endangered Species Act, and that's when I formed this last organization called Save the Yellowstone Grizzly, back in 2016. They wanted to trophy hunt Yellowstone's grizzlies, and you know, and I fought them with all my friends, and we won in federal court. And the bear is back on the endangered species list now. But those guys have been no help, you know, and they just want more guns, more lead. Lead bullets are poisoning condors. You know, it's a source of great mortality for California condors. And, you know, they won't back off. They won't grant. They just want, you know, more lead, more bullets, bigger magazines. And that's crazy. You know, I'm not their friend. And, you know,
I think it makes a lot of sense as to why. Now, Doug, you wrote about an experience on the Galapagos Islands, which were obviously made famous by Charles Darwin nearly 200 years ago. What impressed you most about this place?
Just the species and the natural selection, Darwinism, evolution. It's so palpable down there. All you got to do is open your eyes and ears, and it's in all the birds. You know, the birds have been isolated on these islands with no predators. That's the main thing. Is the highest predator down there is the Galapagos hawk, and there's all of these wonderful land tortoises. And historically, human beings have, you know, killed them and eaten them. You know, pirates and all kinds of whalers used to stop there and load up their boats with land tortoises, these tame animals. But they survived in a world without predation, without predators, without natural enemies. And, you know, their options for survival are so different than we humans and other animals that are continually being hunted, either by each other or, you know, or a similar predator. But down there, it's, you know, you see other possibilities. You wonder what it's like to, you know, to have evolved without danger. You know, it's a tamer, kinder sort of world and evolution, and a world that's just free of most of the threats that you and I would encounter in our daily lives.
Last question, Doug. Considering the title of the book is Was It Worth It? Was it?
Oh yeah, the last couple of pages of the book give every magical experience I've had with animals and wildness. And, you know, the last one is watching a bunch of grizzlies down in a little basin surrounding a little lake. I mean, the lake is only 10 feet across. And there were 4 adult grizzlies, 4 cubs, 2 yearlings, and they're all swaying around this. And I said, you know, science doesn't prepare you for that sort of thing. The bears were dancing. And then I said, it was worth it.
Love that. Doug Peacock is a Vietnam vet, filmmaker, naturalist, and writer who has been published widely on wilderness issues. His newest book, put out by Patagonia, is titled Was It Worth It? A Wilderness Warrior's Long Trail Home. Doug, thank you so much for the time today, and thank you for this very entertaining book.
Well, thank you, Trey. It was a pleasure.
Thanks to Gentleman Jesus for the intro and outro music. Hear more of his work at gentlemanjesus.com. And thanks to you for hanging out. You can watch, listen, learn, and connect for free at booksonpod.com. For Books on Pod, I'm Trey Elling. Good day.